Okay, so let's talk about the ocean. But not the one you're picturing from a postcard. Nope, we're going to dive into an ocean that's, well, it's being transformed by plastic. It's a huge global problem, and in this explainer, we're going to break down just how big it is and what, if anything, we can actually do about it.
For millennia, for millions of years, the ocean was the artist. It shaped our entire planet, right? Its tides, its currents, they carved out the very coastlines we see today. We're talking about a process that works on a geological timescale, incredibly slow, powerful, and natural.
But then, things changed. And I mean, they changed fast. In what is basically a blink of an eye in geological time, that whole relationship has just flipped on its head. Now we're the ones shaping the ocean, and we're leaving this permanent, artificial, and honestly devastating mark everywhere, from the beaches all the way down to the deepest parts of the sea.
All right, let's get into it. Section 1, our plastic ocean. Because to really get a handle on this challenge, you first have to understand the sheer, mind-boggling scale of the problem.
And it's the speed of this change that is it's shocking. Seriously, look at this timeline. Back in the 1950s, we were making about 1.5 million tons of plastic. Fast forward to 2012, almost 300 million tons. And the projection for 2050, if we don't change course, is a staggering 33 billion tons. That's not a line, that's a rocket ship. The growth is just exponential.
So where does all this stuff even come from? Well, a huge chunk of it comes straight from fossil fuels. Think about this. Around 8% of all the oil we pull out of the ground globally, it's not going into cars or power plants, it's used just to make plastic. That directly links this massive pollution problem to our thirst for oil.
But, the issue isn't just the big stuff we can see, like bottles and bags. It's also the plastic that's basically invisible. See, when those larger items break down in the sun and waves, they create what we call microplastics. We're talking about tiny, tiny fragments, less than 5 millimeters across. And get this, we also manufacture them on purpose as microbeads for things like toothpaste and face wash. So we're creating this persistent, almost invisible smog of plastic in our water.
And this picture, this really shows you what we're talking about. At a quick glance, you might just think it's colorful sand, right? Or maybe tiny shells. But it's not. That's all plastic. Little industrial pellets and fragments that are now everywhere, mixing in with the sand, getting into the water, basically becoming a permanent part of the environment.
Okay, so that leads us right into our next section, the devastating impacts. Because all this plastic, it doesn't just float around harmlessly. Let's take a look at the very real, direct harm it's causing to marine life.
And the reality here is, it's dark. It's often really brutal. You've got animals getting tangled up in our garbage, which can lead to horrific injuries, drowning, or starvation. And then you have animals that just mistake plastic for food. This albatross here, it died with a stomach completely full of plastic junk, bottle caps, lighters, a totally fatal case of mistaken identity.
And these aren't just one-off tragic stories. The data, it points to a full-blown crisis. We know that nearly half of all seabird species have been found with plastic in their stomachs. For marine mammals, that number is 40%. And keep in mind, these stats are from 2015. The list of species we know are affected just keeps getting longer.
Now, one of the absolute deadliest forms of plastic debris has a pretty chilling name: ghost fishing gear. What this means is when fishing nets, lines, or traps get lost or just dumped at sea, they don't just disappear. They keep on fishing. They drift through the ocean for years, sometimes even decades, just endlessly trapping and killing whatever gets in their way.
And the scale of this it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. Let's just take one single location as an example, Puget Sound in the US. A study of ghost nets that were removed from the water there estimated that they were still entangling over 3.5 million animals. Annually, every single year. That's from just one kind of garbage in one specific area. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Section 3, counting the cost. Because the price tag for all this plastic isn't just paid by wildlife. There's a huge economic and social cost too. And guess what? We're all paying it. So, someone actually tried to put a number on the damage plastic does to marine ecosystems, what economists call the natural capital cost. Basically, what's the value of what we're losing? The estimate they came up with was a minimum of $13 billion. And that's not a one-time cost. That's every single year. And that huge global number? It breaks down into very real local costs.
Check this out. A study in Orange County, California found that if they could reduce the trash on their beaches by just 25%, it would save the area $32 million in just 3 months. That's money lost from tourism and recreation. So yeah, clean beaches are literally good for business.
So the problem is massive. We get it, but it's not hopeless. And that brings us to Section 4, turning the tide. The human response to this is also massive, and it's growing. Let's look at some of the solutions, from global policies to local action, that are actually being used to fight back.
The cool thing is, the approach is happening on a bunch of different levels all at once. It starts way up at the top, right? You've got global bodies like the UN and the G7 setting big picture goals. That trickles down to regional action, like in the EU. Then you get national laws, like the plastic bag bans and fees you've probably seen. It also means putting pressure on the companies that make this stuff. That's called producer responsibility. And finally, it comes down to us, citizen action, with things like beach cleanups and using apps to track trash.
And here's what that action actually looks like in the real world. You know, we're talking about things that really work. Outright bans on stuff like plastic bags and styrofoam containers. Deposit return programs, where you get money back for returning bottles, that gives them value. We're also seeing fees for single-use items, which just makes you think twice. And a huge push is happening for smarter product and packaging design right from the very beginning.
All right, our final section, innovating for the future. Look, policy is absolutely crucial, but the real game changer? That's going to be innovation. Science and tech are opening up some incredible new ways to tackle this problem right at the source.
The big idea is moving towards what's called a circular economy, where nothing is waste, is just a resource for something else. Scientists are doing amazing things, like creating truly biodegradable bioplastics from, get this, bacteria, or even from the shells of crabs and shrimp. Other teams are perfecting ways to turn old plastic waste back into fuel, or even upcycling it into super high-tech, high-value things like nanomaterials. And this isn't just pie-in-the-sky lab stuff, it's really happening. You have groups like the Think Beyond Plastics Innovation Forum, whose whole job is to find and fast-track these new businesses. They're helping create a real market for alternatives that can actually compete with and maybe one day completely replace the plastics we use now. But even as we work on solutions, we have to face this really bizarre new reality that we've created. Scientists have discovered something they're calling the Plastisphere. It is a completely new, totally artificial ecosystem. It's teeming with microbial life that has literally evolved to live on our floating plastic garbage. Think about that. We have created a brand new habitat in the ocean, made of our own trash.
And that leads us to the final big question. We have, in a very real way, created a new layer of life on our planet, born entirely from our waste. So the challenge for us, for our generation, and the ones that follow, is pretty clear, isn't it? We created the Plastisphere. What on earth is it going to take to unmake it?